right, testing 1, 2. Recording going on.
Welcome, we're back to Reach a Village. This is our second part of the video series, helping to introduce you, the audience, to who we are and what we're all about. So we talked in the last episode about when Reach a Village was started, kind of why it was started, why there was a need to create another organization, another mission. And we talked a little bit about the nuances of what reached actually meant when we're talking about reaching unreached villages.
Right.
So maybe today we're going to talk a little bit more about some specifics. What is unique about Reach a Village that kind of separates it from some other mission agencies?
Well, I'm thinking, again, that I need to reiterate that it's a cause. Reach a Village is not just trying to build an organization called Reach a Village. We're trying to bring other people into the discussion and into the actual application of reaching out strategically into villages and into areas of countries where villages remain unreached for 2,000 years since Christ left. So the pressure that we're feeling is that this is a cause that hasn't really been focused on. I mean, in the last 35 years of missions, we can all kind of say, well, yeah, I remember somebody coming and talking about unreached people groups. Yeah, and so whole websites were started, and there's definitely a need to reach an isolated group of a particular language off in some remote area. That's also on our radar. But as I said to more than one person now in my discussions, when you take off in that little MAF plane from Bangkok and you fly way up into a mountain village somewhere where there are 5,000 people that speak a particular dialect and you want to try to reach them, you flew over 60,000 villages that have a Bible, that have some access to the gospel if somebody were to bring it to them. So they're unreached, but they're not unreachable. So that, I think, is worth saying again. That's really at the core of what we're doing. So we want people to cooperate in the task of reaching unreached villages because, after all, it's been 2,000 years since the Great Commission was given, and I don't think we're finished yet.
We are
based
not.
on the maps, we're not finished yet. So we shouldn't assume we are.
Well, one of the really cool things that I've recently come on board with Reach a Village as of January, finishing up seminary, and it's just been so exciting. And one of the things I really like is you have when you kind of talk about Reach a Village and what you do, you have a phrase or something that's really catchy where you say there's a bunch of M's. So I want you to share with the listeners today about the various M's within Reach a Village.
Well, when Jesus gave the command, it sounds pretty simple. Go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded. But when you think about the Great Commission and you break it down a little bit, the first word is go. So there's mobilization involved. There's motivation. Why would anybody want to go? I mean, he's talking to his disciples, so they should be motivated by their own experience that they've had with Jesus, that they want to share Jesus. So there's motivation, there's mobilization. And then he says, teach them to obey everything I have commanded. So there's this behind the scenes, the words of Jesus need to be involved. So that comes in the form of a New Testament or materials, as we say. So another M there. So the materials that you use are also an important part of this whole formula of fulfilling the Great Commission. So mobilizing, motivating, make sure you have the materials that contain what Jesus said and let people learn about Jesus. You need Bibles, you need Bible study materials, you need at least people who are able to share Bible stories in a way that impacts the local culture. So that's just 3 of the M's that we have about 7. So in order to say, well, wait a minute, Jesus commanded us to go into Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria. Oh, wait a minute, that sounds like geographic areas. So there's the need for mapping. There's the need for figuring out exactly where the unreached villages are, where they're not, finding out the progress of the gospel. How are we doing on this going? Okay, it's one thing to just go, but you better know where you're going and why you're going. And that's the M's that we get into. We map. We monitor people. People need to be, these disciples were sent out on their own, but when they came back, Jesus talked to them and he shared with them. And if you keep in mind the Great Commission, after Jesus ascended, the Holy Spirit was with them. So he was constantly mentoring them and sharing with them things that they would need in order to go into a new village and share the gospel with people. So there's the mentoring, the monitoring, the measuring of impact. What was the response? Jesus asked his disciples, if I remember correctly, he said, if a village receives you, great, do this. If they don't receive you, do this. So when the disciples came back from that initial mission, it says, and they reported all that they had done. And Jesus said, oh, okay, now here's my response to the response. So, you can't really say we fulfilled the Great Commission if you can't actually follow down this chain of events that needs to occur before you can say the village has been reached. People responded or didn't. How did they respond? What was our response to their response? And was it biblical? Did we do what we were asked to do when we went? So that's part of the Reach a Village strategy, is that we don't leave anything out. We try to find out in our way of going that we're doing things in the way that will produce impact, and that the villages actually say, okay, they're reached or they're not reached, and here's why, and here's what happened.
All right, so let's go over those M's.
All right.
You have, we covered,
Mobilization.
Mobilization
was mentioned because that's the first word, go into all the world. But prior to mobilization, you got to have motivation. And that comes from somebody's walk with the Lord. So sending the wrong person into an unreached village is a mistake. Or sending them in for the wrong reason is a mistake. And so for all this to work well and for the Great Commission to finally be fulfilled in terms of people responding to Jesus in a way that they're obeying what he's commanded, means that you have to strategically look at the motivation for going in. You look at the mobilization. Are they going to have to fly in, walk in, crawl in, ride on a donkey in? You got to think about how to get there. Mobilization is part of it. And then you've got to think about how you're going to prepare them for going in. So that's your mentoring and you're monitoring them. You're going to have to help them with materials. You're going to have to help them remember what I have commanded. And we have those, thankfully, in the New Testament. We have our Bibles. We have materials that we can use. So all of these things are tools to make sure that we're properly reaching out into a village, taking what we need to take, and no more than what we need to take, and sharing the gospel, the pure gospel with them, and watching what the Holy Spirit does in the response and their response back to what they've heard. So it's pretty simple, but we measure it. We ask them to report back on what happened in that village and what the village name was. And if there were people who responded, that they actually did what Jesus said, and they go inside and they sit down with this person and they share the gospel. What's their names? Who'd you share with? Because when you look at the Apostle Paul and all of his writings, starts out with greetings to people in that place. And it ends with all these salutations to these families.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I don't know who we shared with. We just went in and shared the gospel. We stood up on a stump out in the middle of the village and we preached and then we moved on. Well, that doesn't really sound like even what Paul did. Paul remembered the people's names. He remembered their response to the gospel. He even says, I baptized this family and this family, but I didn't baptize anybody else, And he kept up with things. So that's part of fulfilling the Great Commission. We must measure and carefully record what we do in trying to fulfill the Great Commission. At least that's the Reach a Village approach.
Wow. So again, that is why I'm so excited to partner with Reach a Village, because it's so deep. It's everything that my dad has captured over the last 40 years of ministry and has just it's condensed it into these are the essentials for reaching the unreached, and it's exciting. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about, so what are the kind of the 3 or 4 big areas that Reach a Village or things that they do in each of these countries or across the region? What are some of the 4 ministry models or emphasis of the ministry?
Well, when you approach a village, you're approaching the full demographic for number one. You're going to have older people, middle-aged people, people with children. So you have to think about the method and the materials that you're going to use or need in order for all of these people to be informed. Some of the older ones may not read. So maybe you just need to take some flip charts or a handheld device and play a story for them or tell a story to them. So that may be a tool you need to take. And then you may have a segment of the village where there's a village school, they know how to read, and so some Bible study materials for them. Then you have the children who are this is the first time they're hearing about Jesus. So whatever you hand them or give to them on their level is also important, because that's their very first impression about Jesus. What does Jesus look like? Or do you even want to show a picture of Jesus, or do you just want to tell stories with scenes that are familiar to these children, but without trying to draw a picture for them of God, what he might look like? Do we want him to have the big gray beard and be laying on a cloud reaching down? Is that the first thing we want these children who know nothing to see? So even the images you use and the imagery you use, so children's materials, things for the older folks who may not read, and then of course for those who do read and who do want to would be able to take a New Testament after you leave and dig into it, and you come lead them and guide them through some Bible studies. So all of these things are important as part of an overall true approach to reaching a village.
So what I hear you say is, so you're working with children.
Right. Children. So children have to be part of your platform. Whatever you do, you cannot exclude children from it. And you have to think about literate or illiterate. You have to think about appropriate material. So printing and helping people print and publish their own materials that they need for their context. Have local illustrators. So importing something where everybody in every picture is dressed like we are in the West might not get the gospel across correctly to people in a village. So just everything has to be thought through in how appropriate it is to actually convey the message of Jesus to these people, to this particular context, to this village or this culture or subculture, this language. So quite a bit of thought needs to go into it. But thankfully, Our platform, our ministry revolves around local people. So a lot of these local people will be very familiar with the culture. They'll know just how to express something, how to illustrate something. They might even speak two languages, the one from this village, from their own village, and the one also from this village that's just across the mountain from them. They trade with them already. They have relatives, and so they kind of know which word to use or not use. And so that gives us also an important inroad into a community is communication. The communicator. So you say, well, yeah, but shouldn't we be sending missionaries? Well, wow, that means if there's 1 million villages, we need to be thinking about sending 1 million missionaries. Well, maybe not. First, you have to learn the language, the culture. And I saw this in my own experience. It takes a lot of time to learn a language. A lot of time. Just pure old time and effort. And then when I bridged myself into that community and tried to share the gospel, I was often misunderstood. I didn't know that word or that word or that word. And so they're just, while it may be the only way the gospel got into certain places, since we work with indigenous groups and Christians who already exist in nearby language groups to go out and reach a little further out and further out and further out, the opportunity for them to actually have the knowledge to reach a village in their proximity is exponentially higher than me coming in from the outside trying to do it. So I think all of these things are keys as to why Reach a Village is a bit unique, in that we're not a missionary sending agency primarily. Do we believe that there's a role for missionaries? Sure.
Yeah.
There always will be. God's going to call people to go and do this and that and fly planes and, translate Bibles. And there's so many wonderful things that he has called many expat missionaries to do. Wonderful things. But when it comes to reaching villages, the best people to reach a village are villagers. And the best people to communicate are people who speak that language and grew up with it. And they know how to express deep spiritual things. This is something I learned. It's one thing for me to learn a language and learn how to call a taxi and tell him where I want to go. Now, that's one thing.
Right.
But when you're talking to people on a heart level and spiritual understanding and spiritual things, that's a whole other vocabulary. We're not even comfortable doing that with other white folks, with other Americans that we come across. We're not even that good at feeling free to just share with anybody in our own culture. So for me to think I can go and bridge across cultures and be really comfortable and fluent and all these things, that takes a lot of time. A lot of time. And I'll never be one of them. Even if I speak like them, dress like them, they say it this way, but your mother wasn't one of us. In other words, by birth, you'll never be one of us. Oh, but your mother wasn't one of us. You're great. I mean, you're fluent, and so they say the wonderful things. They appreciate all your efforts, but you'll never be one of them. That was just like a revelation to me. Okay, there's only so far I can go as an outsider coming in to try to reach a village. There's only so much I can do, and that the locals can do it so much better. And that's why Jesus turned his 12 loose right away. Okay, you guys go. I want you to go into this particular area, preach the gospel in the villages there, come back and let me know how it went. And so that's what he did. So he used that same model. Jesus used that same model. Even with his own disciples, he didn't do it all himself.
Yeah. Awesome. I could sit here and talk all day, but we're going to go ahead and close this video series, the video episode up today, and we'll have some more content being released, hopefully weekly. So keep coming back to YouTube. Please feel free to subscribe, share this on your social media platforms, on Facebook and Twitter. Help us get our name out there. Because I believe what we're doing is cutting edge. It's impactful. It's kingdom oriented. It's empowering local champions in each of these countries that we're working. And I've met the leadership there. Awesome. We're working with the best of the best in these nations, and I'm just really excited to share this with you. That's why I want you guys to share it, and we look forward to just continuing to release new content, testimonies, what we do, why we do it, reports from the field. So just stay tuned, and see you in the next episode.